Hi everyone. We've just started our webinar. Here's our guest, Mark Roberge today. Please type a message that the audio and video quality are okay for you. Just let us know if everything is okay. You can use the chat window on your right.
And testing on my side, hopefully my my video and audio is okay. I'm excited to chat with everyone here.
Great, great. Linda is typing, everything is fine. Great. Let's do it. Looks good. Amazing. So I guess we are ready to start. So as it is gonna be the Ask Me Anything session, we're not gonna stick to any presentation. It's gonna be just a question and answer from our expert. First of all, let me set the rules for today's meeting. So if you have any questions, please use the chat window on your right side so that you could ask us questions. And then I will be gathering these questions and will be asking Mark. If you also will have some questions in the end, I'm available online, and you can send me an email. I will resend it to Mark if he's going to be available as well to answer the questions. But I hope we're going to answer everything today during our 1-hour session. So let's start. Today at our webinar, Mark Roberge, and also of the best-selling book, Sales Acceleration Formula, former Chief Revenue Officer for HubSpot, senior lecturer for Harvard Business School, and currently I've noticed that, Mark, you've got some update on your LinkedIn that you are a managing director at Stage 2 Capital. It's great, and of course, my congratulations on this event to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, happy to elaborate on that as well. I think it's relevant to our conversation today. So thank you, Margot, for the introduction, and excited everyone to chat with you this hour.
Amazing. So my name is Margot. I'm a growth marketer for CallPage. The webinar is going to be organized by my company. And let's just jump to details. So that's going to be a great value for you. My intention for organizing this webinar is that you, people from sales and marketing, are going to introduce all these strategies tomorrow or even today. I hope this webinar is going to be very practical and you could apply it in your daily work. So, Mark, I have recently watched your presentation on the SaaStr conference. Mm-hmm. This was published just yesterday on their YouTube channel. Yep. And you started your presentation with the definition of growth, what growth means for a SaaS company. We can look at growth from different angles. We can look at growth as something really fast, dynamic. We can get users. We can get a big number of users. But in the very end, these users are going to churn because they don't see the value from using the product. And they will not get a proper onboarding in their first months of being with the business. So let's probably start with definition of growth. How do you see a successful startup? How growth should look like?
Yeah, I'm not sure that my definition of growth is that different. I mean, I think we can talk about, we can talk about it in terms of revenue growth and number of customers. What I think people really don't do a good job on is the path to get there. And I think that as a business community, we've had an unhealthy and premature obsession with rapid revenue growth. It's just a little bit of a confusion as to when we're ready for that. And I've had the luxury the last 4 years since leaving my full-time position at HubSpot, to join the faculty here at Harvard, but to also have a lot of time to spend with startups, to spend with big companies. I also, do quite a bit of work with BCG, with the Fortune 100, and large companies across the world. I work with medium-sized businesses. I work with a lot of startups. And this is something that I see across the board is there's confusion as to when we're ready to scale. In the last 10 years or so, we've thrown out this term product market fit, which is great. Eric Ries, Steve Blank, I was just sharing his book right here. They've helped us to understand that you can't just come up with an idea and just start selling the idea before you have the product. We need to have product market fit. But I think there's confusion around when that occurs, and sometimes we're not as aggressive as we should be about defining what it means. I think a lot of people think it means we have a couple of customers who like our product, who use it. It doesn't have any bugs, or if it's a physical product, it doesn't have anything broken with it. And they gave us case studies. But that's premature. And as you start to scale, the question is, first, can you create customer value consistently? So if we sign up 10 customers this month or 10 customers this quarter, like a few months later, do 80% of them use your product and like your product? And can you do that consistently? That's how I define product market fit. And that's sort of the first stage of knowing whether or not you're ready for growth. The second stage, which a lot of people skip, is what I call go-to-market fit. So just because you have a product and you now can sell it, and most of the people who buy it like it and got value out of it, the question is, can you do that profitably? Like, can you sell them for an amount that's going to make a profit for your business? And can do you have demand gen that ways to generate demand that'll feed your team? And that's a big step that a lot of people skip. And I call that go-to-market fit as measured by unit economics. And then once you've checked those boxes, then you're ready for growth. And not growth like add 10 salespeople next month and add $1 million to your marketing budget. But growth is like, let's start adding one salesperson a month and see if it breaks. And let's measure product market fit and go-to-market fit in order to see if we're scaling too fast or if we're scaling too slow. So that was really the speech at SaaStr. I've been told it was the #1 speech. I don't know how they're measuring it, but thank you for the people that attended it and liked it. I know I got a lot of messages about it. But it was really trying to challenge the business community around a deeper framework around when you're ready to scale and how fast.
Mm-hmm. The question I've been asking myself is also related to these aha moments and communicating the value to customers, also helping them understand there is the value, helping them feel this value at some point. So what I was being questioning myself is actually how to measure that the customer has already reached these moments. Should we use metrics? I know that you are a very metrics-driven person, because at every conference you are showing a lot of diagrams. You are basing it on your own experience and some data, and so on and so forth. So could you tell us what would be your approach to measure?
It's a great question. Yeah, how do you measure customer success? Because that's if we kind of back up a step on why we think people are skipping this customer success step, because there's a history to it. Especially if, like, in software. I'm not sure how much of the audience is from software, but I think it applies to every business. In software, 20 years ago, before the internet was widely adopted, we would sell this software that people would install on they'd have to buy servers to install the software. And usually it was very expensive, like millions of dollars. And so all that mattered was you got the customer to buy. And then they bought the servers and then they set up the software. And lots of times the software was really bad. Like, no one used it. And that's where the term shelfware came about. It sat on the shelf and no one used it. But that didn't matter back then. You were stuck with it. You bought the servers, you bought the software, you trained the company, you spent millions of dollars. It didn't matter if no one used it. But all that changed with the internet, because now we had cloud computing and we can, it's very easy to adopt these products and it's very easy to churn. We also had the subscription economy where we buy lots of things on a subscription, software, our food, our razors. And that makes churn really important. And the other big thing is customers have this big megaphone called social media that they can tell everyone in the world with a click of the button if they have a good experience or a bad experience with a product. And if you roll out a product and you get 10 one-star reviews on Google or Yelp, it's going to be very difficult for you to build a business. So there's a huge why now as to the importance of focusing on customer success generation first and making sure you nail that. So to your question, Margot, like how do you measure that? I've found that that is unique to the business. It's kind of like, it's very close to like, what is the unique value proposition of your business? There's no like consistent answer to it, but I can give you some examples and I can explain a little bit of a framework around it. Okay, so as people seek, like, do I have customer success? One of the most logical ways in, say, a subscription business is whether or not your customers cancel or renew. And so your churn rate. Now, the problem with your churn rate is it tends to take a long time to figure it out. Sometimes people sign annual contracts, so it could take a year to figure out how your churn is. We can't wait a year to know. So we need to find a leading indicator that predicts customer satisfaction, okay? And hopefully that leading indicator is something we can observe quantitatively in the first few months of a customer's life cycle, okay? So I'll give you a couple examples. At Dropbox, their leading indicator was when a customer uploaded one file to one device and I think shared it with one person. If they did that, the ultimate retention rate of that customer was really high. If they didn't, it was really low. So they could obsess with measuring what % of the customers they acquire every month fall into that good bucket or bad. And that's a quick way for them to they run a bunch of experiments. For Slack, you know, Slack's very popular these days. If they get a team that engages, if they send over 2,000 messages amongst the team in a month, that's a very good sign. Those that do all end up being really successful customers. Those that don't tend to be a little flaky. At HubSpot, we're a marketing software with like 20 different features. If our customer adopted 5 of those features in the first 60 days, they were really likely to succeed on our product for a long time. If they didn't, not so good. Okay, so I have other ones like I worked with a sweatshirt company. And if they left a positive review or if they bought another product within the first 90 days, those were indications of customer success. So getting outside of tech, those were some of the ways that people are measuring it. So the important point is that you have some sort of observed behavior about your customer in the first few months of their experience with your product that you can measure and then run a bunch of experiments to improve it and see very quickly if you're making those improvements. Okay, so I'm sorry that there's not one universal way, but hopefully, you know, it's measurable first few months, and oftentimes it's connected to the unique value prop of your business. Dropbox, uploading files, sharing. Slack, communication. HubSpot, all-in-one marketing. And each of their leading indicators was connected to their unique value proposition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just started thinking about CallPage, the company where I'm working, and I started thinking about our competitors that are basically offering the same option. Yeah, let's take this simple example, a callback. If you have a high traffic on your webpage and you are, let's say, an auto dealer, so you are interested in getting more hot leads. So for you, it's a great solution because you can catch up with your hot leads very fast and then respond to their inquiries by like calling them back.
Right.
So our competitors are doing that the same way, and I trying to figure out what is the competitive advantage. In our platform, it's just a very stable technological solution. And how would our competitor, for example, differentiate themselves from our solution?
Yeah, I think that's a very important reflection about your unique value proposition and whether or not, and what is the unique value proposition of your customers, of your competitors. And as you interview 50 potential customers, where is their head at in terms of their most important buyer criteria? Is it aligned with your competition or is it aligned with you? And then also, what's the right answer for them? Because sometimes the customers don't know what's best for them. So sometimes they might be thinking, oh, I think this is the answer, which is aligned with the competition. But in the end, it's not going to work for them. And you have to like rewire their perspective. Like as an example for us at HubSpot, we sold to marketers. And we sold software that helped companies to do blogging and social media in a way, create content that attracted customers and converted them to leads. So we sold to marketers whose job was to create leads. Now, our competition sold a different way of marketing. They sold a way of marketing which was to buy a database of cold leads and send them emails every day to see if they can get them to service up. Now, when marketers were choosing between those two strategies, most of them thought our competitor strategy was better because it was easier. It was just buy a list and send them emails and I can go have a beer by the pool. Versus like taking on the effort of writing content. That's scary. That's putting yourself out there. Now your CEO is going to see everything. It's scary. But over time, there was research done that showed that buying a database and sending them emails, all that does is get you into the spam list. You know what I mean? You start to get known as a junk mail company. And so you're better off doing the inbound approach. But that was an example of we understood our unique value prop and we had to reframe the perspective of our buyer to be aligned with it. And it ended up being, use 5 features at a time. That ended up being, so for you guys, if you guys are the most stable one, I don't know. I mean, I probably would, this gets into competitor selling, but I would probably try to take careful notes about companies that used your competition and then found out the product didn't really work very well and then switched to you and found the product worked really well. And I would just make those customers sort of VIP customers, give them special treatment and ask if they might be willing to do reference checks every once in a while for your prospective customers. And train your sales team that when you have prospects that are evaluating you against the competition, ask them if as part of the evaluation, they would be interested in talking to a customer who's used both companies so they can get perspective, right? So that's an example of competitive selling, especially when you're selling something like stability, like your unique differentiator stability, which everyone's going to claim that they're stable, even though they're not. Right. So anyway, we got a little deep there on the competitive stuff.
Yeah, I got you. And actually it's something that I'd like to talk about later on today, about just talking to your customers, talking to your also potential customers and customers of your competition to find out quite interesting details we even don't expect hearing. So there are several questions. Jan is asking, what are your thoughts on contact to lead and lead lifecycle stages and aligning them across sales and marketing teams?
The alignment I got, but the first one was, what are my thoughts on contact to lead? What is that?
Yeah.
What are my thoughts on contact to lead percentage or?
Well, Yanis, the question to you, could you just specify that? So,
okay. You can read and I'll talk a little bit about sales and marketing alignment because it's a very good question.
Yeah.
And there's it's a big opportunity for many businesses. I always joke around a bit that I've spent time with hundreds of businesses on sales and marketing. And I find that these two departments don't usually get along, right? Like marketing thinks that sales are overpaid, spoiled brats. And salespeople think that marketers just do arts and crafts all day. And they don't understand each other's worlds. And historically, they've gone back to their kind of separate corners of the office where marketing works on their trade show booths for the next conference and salespeople do their cold to get business. And that's the kiss of death today as a company, when today's buyers so empowered by the internet that most buying journeys start in a domain that's owned by marketing. Most buyer journeys start on a website, in an email, in social media, someplace owned by marketing, and they progress to a world owned by sales. And if those two groups are not really well aligned, the buyers can feel that, and you usually lose a lot of business. But if you can get them really well aligned, then it's a great experience. So some of it is sort of just an operational challenge of making sure that when someone comes to your website or when someone opens up an email, that you're capturing that information for that user. And when they actually convert to a lead on your website by filling out a form or something, that all that information is available to the salesperson so they can have a 360 view of that customer. Because it is so valuable before you call a lead to know that they found you through a Google search for this term and they read these 3 blog articles on your website. It tells you a lot as a seller about what their interests are. And it gives you a big opportunity as a seller to not just call up and say, would you like a demo? But instead to call up and say, hey, I noticed that you've been researching information around online lead generation. And I've worked with your peers for the past few months. I'm happy to share some of the best practices that I've been seeing. That is just such a more, relevant call to action to your buyer that's aligned with the stage that they're at in the buying journey. Okay, so there's some operational stuff. And then there's some measurement stuff of when you think about like how should we measure marketing? We shouldn't really measure marketing on visitors or even leads. Like when you have if you have a lead, a lead that from a CEO who downloaded an ebook, that's probably a really good lead. But if a CEO requests a demo, that's an even better lead. Usually that lead closed multiple times higher. So when you think about, the lead accountability of marketing, you got to think about it on like 2 axes where this is the engagement of the lead, sign up to the blog, download an ebook, in a trial, request a demo, they're getting more engaged. But then this is the quality of the company in terms of the type of company you have. And you give them more. Usually what I do is I look at a conversion rate around the different types of leads from lead to customer in each box. And that allows me to assign a dollar value to each box. So maybe ABC for engagement, ABC for type of company. And the AAs are clearly the best. Really great company, highly engaged. I'll give marketing $100 of credit for that. And the BCs are okay. I might only give them $20. And over time, if you measure that, you can multiply the amount of money that each type of customer buys your product for times the conversion rate of that box, and that gives you a lead value. And now you're in a position to put marketing on a revenue quota, just like you put sales. You basically say, marketing, you need to generate $50,000 of lead value this month, and they can get it through a couple AAs or a bunch of CCs. And I know that's a little hard to describe, but the point is there are opportunities to quantify marketing's, just be very specific with marketing on what a bullseye is and allow them to quantify their success.
I guess from the side of marketing, I just add that you really, in order for these to happen, you really have to know what a great lead is and what lead can convert into a high-paying customer. So there should be some knowledge acquired from the market also during the, let's say, not quantitative but qualitative review. So even video calls with the current customers would give quite a lot of insight into what they feel, why they're using the platform or this SaaS solution, especially if you're doing these video calls or just calls, phone calls with the customers with the highest lifetime value. So it's something I'd definitely go for. But what Jan probably meant is when exactly should a lead be passed from the marketing department to
the okay, that's a good question. Yeah, so that's a good point, Margot, of like, you know, you want to have a clear definition of what those leads are, what's sales qualified. And that's where that sort of diagram helps. And it's not necessarily that marketing is dictated or sales dictating. It's just that you agree in advance. And you don't just say, hey, marketing, give me 100 leads. You know, they're getting more credit for good leads and less credit for bad ones. But regardless, we agree what a good lead is, and sales is going to call it. And if for some reason we feel like the definition's off, we'll change the definition. But it allows us to move away from salespeople saying, oh, all the leads suck, and I'm not making my number because marketing's not doing anything. If that's happening, you just haven't set this up right. You've got to create what we call a service level agreement, an SLA, between marketing and sales. And so in terms of like when you should pass it, it's a good question. And it's something that you want to like change depending on the lead quality, right? So as an example, if you sell to big companies and you sell to small companies, then when you want to pass it to sales will differ dramatically because of the potential value of that customer, right? So a small company, they may be, you know, we have to be careful that we don't spend too much time selling to them because they just don't have that much budget. So in those cases, we want to try to push them as far along in the buying journey with marketing, with non-human interaction, emails, nurturing, all that kind of stuff, to the point where they're very educated on your space and your product, and there's only a few more steps to do. So I might say for a small company, I might pass it at, say, when they request a demo. But if a big company comes in and they can spend a lot of money with you, I don't want to nurture them until demo request. I want to call them right away, like right when they touch the website, because I can afford to put a lot of effort into that customer, because if they buy, it's going to be a big deal. So you sort of want to discriminate it based on the potential value of that customer. And you can actually get pretty scientific about it, because if you decide, okay, with these small companies, let's wait until the demo request until we pass it to sales. And if you find that like 60% of them are closing to customers and the unit economics on it is really good, you might be too aggressive and you might try bringing it back a little and say, start calling them at like when they downloaded an ebook or something. And you might, even though the close rate might drop to 40%, there's like 10 times more. And so you're able to generate a lot more business. So, or if you drop it to the ebook and only 2% are closing and you try to train sales and it's not working, you just can't build a business. You got to push it back to make it further down. So it gives you can hopefully discriminate based on the potential, and then you can play with it scientifically to see where the right spot is.
Right. So you mentioned this magical word scientifically. In which way could we implement this scientific element? Should we place it in our Excel file and in some way to generate some kind of a formula and visualize it on a visual board? What would be like implementation stage?
Sure. For this particular problem?
Yeah.
Of like when I don't know. I've seen that a lot of different places. I mean, the more you can automate it, the better. You know, if you're exporting stuff to Excel, you can put a lot of overhead on yourself. And fortunately, in the last 10, 15 years, sales and marketing software has just exploded. There's a lot of tools out there for us. So at the very least, I would, have some sort of marketing software that's automating this. And then probably a CRM, which are cheap and good these days, that help you to capture some of the conversion data. I'm not employed at HubSpot anymore. I am an advisor, so I guess I have. But I mean, I did work a lot on a a free CRM that we put out. So, but there's lots of options like that. You know, the whole space has become pretty innovative. So there's a lot of cheap and very good tools that solve this problem.
All right.
HubSpot being one of them.
That's a great tip. Daniel is asking, what do SaaS companies typically get wrong when they are executing demand generation? Coming back to one of the points.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so good question. There's a lot of different places there. I would say they probably underinvest in the inbound stuff and overinvest in outbound cold calling and advertising. That does depend on the buyer. Some buyers you can actually get on the phone. For example, if you sell to salespeople, you can get them on the phone so easily. It's really easy to get a salesperson on. If you sell to IT or engineers, they don't even have phones. They have no phones, right? So it's like some of this depends on the buyer. But most of the people in demand gen, they underinvest in creating good content online that attracts the buyer, which that works for almost any type of buyer, and overinvest in sort of outbound tactics that they feel like is a little easier to control. The other thing that they do is they measure success of the demand generation on top of funnel metrics as opposed to bottom of funnel metrics. So they might measure the success of a campaign based on how many leads were created, but they fail to look at how many of them became customers for how much revenue, and also how good those customers were in terms of quality. So this is sort of a contradiction to what I said before, but I've found when I look at a lot of businesses that the customer quality from the outbound efforts from cold calling is actually quite high, because you convince this cold person to like buy into your process that you can't really skip any steps, and they're quite knowledgeable about the purchase on what's happening. Versus sometimes it can struggle on the inbound side, is someone was interested in something and then you kind of like lied that you have something that they want, and you arm twisted them or tricked them into a purchase that led to churn. So that's one of the mistakes, is measuring success of demand gen on top of the funnel metrics, appointments, leads. Instead, measure it based on customers and revenue and the success of that revenue.
Yeah, I just started thinking about the post of Kevin Dorsey, who posted today that the sales development manager was calling a lead, and the lead told that, well, I don't trust you because it seems to be that you are phishing.
Yeah, exactly.
It was funny. And then they made a photo with this real person, the SDR, standing at the wall and pointing out with her finger at a sentence that's, well, I'm real. I'm not phishing you.
Oh gosh, that's so funny. That's really cool. I didn't see that one. That's really cool.
Yeah. So coming back to questions, Linda is asking, do you think there is such a thing as a customer journey in enterprise sales?
Yeah, for sure. So if I interpret the question, and she can, if Linda wants to chime back in and clarify if I don't answer it right. But you know, if we talk about customer journey, we talk about buyer journey, it's such an important concept today that as we're thinking about our sales and marketing programs, I find that too many of them are designed from the outside in. I mean, sorry, from the inside out, meaning, okay, we built this product and here's what the product does, and here's how we want the customers to use it. So let's build a website and a PowerPoint deck and a demo and tell everybody about what our product does and how they should use it and how they're going to get value. But instead, if you look at it from the buyer's lens, the buyer usually isn't like waking up and being like, I need a product. Usually they have a problem, or they have an opportunity that they're pursuing. I want to reduce costs. I want to drive profitability. I want to pursue a new market. I want to increase demand gen, right? And so they're first trying to educate themselves about that opportunity or that problem. Why is it broken? How do people think about this? what are the best practices? At that point, they don't even know if they need to buy a product. Should they hire someone? Should they hire a consultant? Should they just read a book? Like, they're not sure. And so when you're out there asking everyone to see your product, you're not aligned. Like, your product's down here. Like, they're going to go from, being aware of the problem to considering different solutions to making a decision on a product. I call it the awareness, consideration, decision sequence. And if you're talking about demos when they're at the awareness, you're not lining up. Versus if we're talking about education about a problem, then you're going to catch those people. Okay. So suddenly when you first set up the customer journey and then build your marketing and your sales on top of it to support it, then it becomes a much better experience for them and a much more successful execution for you. So does the customer journey or buyer journey apply in the enterprise? Well, people talk about enterprise as just all of B2B. Some people talk about as big companies. I absolutely think it applies in both. Let's just talk about the big company. I think it'll check both boxes. I mean, a big company has a very complicated customer journey, a very complicated buyer journey, because the definition of problems and opportunities can come at every different level, like the CEO, middle management, frontline people. And typically when you engage with one of them, you have to like win over a whole decision committee to get a deal done. And so sometimes like you might find, so it's really important in sort of an enterprise selling process where you have a customer journey. You might have multiple customer journeys for the different types of roles that are involved in the buyer decision, right? So if we're talking about our world, Margot, like selling lead generation, the user might be a marketer, but the boss is a CMO. And there might be some technical requirements who's a CIO, and the budget might come from the CFO. All of them have very different buyer journeys. Usually the overall customer's buyer journey, the overall company's buyer journey will start with the end user. And usually the end user is trying to do their job faster and better. Okay. Now, then they might ask their boss. Now, the boss doesn't care that the end user can do their job faster. They don't care about getting them to go home early. The end user loves it. I get to go home early. The boss doesn't care. I don't need, but the boss does care about more efficiency. So we pitch the boss in a different way. Now, the IT guy doesn't care about either of them. All the IT guy person cares about is security and not having to do a lot of work. So their buyer journey is really different on like how secure it is, easy to do. And the CFO cares about return on investment. And everyone's asking them for money and they can only say yes like 10% of the time. So they have to understand huge business impact, right? So you can see there that like building out the buyer journey, the customer journey for not just the company, but all the roles involved give you a lot of guidance as a seller and a marketer on how to win that deal. So hopefully, Linda, that was in line, and happy to, if you have a follow-up, you can put it in there and we can clarify as the discussion goes on.
Exactly. So the next question was from Duane. In terms of a compensation plan, what should the difference be from an account executive to an SDR? In a true SDR role, should the SDR be an activity-based or similar to the account executive?
Oh boy, we only have 20 minutes left. Woo! Compensation. That's a big one. Okay, so I'll start with some high level. First off, most companies make the mistake of copying the compensation plan of another company or the compensation plan that they used at a different company. Most CEOs delegate the decision to their head of sales, and the head of sales implements what they used at their last company. And that's a big lost opportunity. The compensation plan needs to be customized to the strategy of the business. And that, so that strategy, you have some businesses that are trying to get a new product out. You have some companies that are trying to win in a new market. You have some companies that are trying to sell better quality customers to deflect churn. You have some companies that are trying to like prove out a new demand gen channel, like cold calling. You have some, the list goes on. And for each one of those settings, I could devise a comp plan that's optimized for that, right? So it's really important. For example, if I'm going into a new market, I'm going to give a higher rate for customers from that new market, or I may require them to hit a certain threshold in that new market that influences the rate on their overall plan. If I'm trying to get a cold calling to work, I may specialize a team just on that and compensate on those deals. So it's like, you, as a CEO, you got to think about, what is your strategy? Forget about sales for a second. What is your strategy as the business this year? And are there opportunities for you to align the sales compensation plan with that? Given your strategy, what behaviors do you want your salespeople to exhibit? And how can I compensate them for those behaviors? Okay, so that's one lost opportunity. Now, account executives versus SDRs. Let's just deal with SDRs for a second. Account executives, usually the compensation plan is tied to like revenue generation, customer generation, et cetera. For SDRs, there's a debate. Do we do it on activity or do it on revenue? And I can tell you, when I set up the first SDR team at HubSpot, we did it on activity and on number of appointments that were set. And that was wrong. What ended up happening was every time the account executive hit their number and that the SDR was feeding, if the account executive hit their number, they lied about the number of appointments and gave the SDR more appointments, so they made more money. If the account executive missed their number, they blamed the SDR and wanted us to take away appointments that shouldn't count toward their plan because they were bad appointments. And at that point, I was like, wow, why don't we just align these? So SDR, from here on out, you're just going to be paid on the revenue that comes from your appointments. And that really nicely aligned the SDR. So I don't like to see a big SDR team of like 20 SDRs feeding a big account executive team of like 20 account executives, because they don't get to know each other and there's not a lot of accountability. I like to create smaller groups of like 3 SDRs with 3 account executives and have all the appointments flow, so then you can get away with this kind of compensation plan. Now, I have iterated a bit on my opinions here because I've seen some people pull off some sort of activity approaches. So what I like to do with an SDR, it's a very hard role for like a year or two that they do. I like to set up these graduation paths, these promotion paths, that you go from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3 to tier 4. You go through like 6 tiers. And each tier takes about 3 months, but it doesn't have to take 3 months. It could take longer, it could take shorter. And you have specific metrics they have to hit to move up to the next tier, and they get a promotion and a little bit of a extra incentive. So tier 1 could be they have to pass a test on the product and the sales process and set 10 appointments. Tier 2 is going to be very activity based. You have to make at least $50 a day and set at least 7 appointments a week. Okay. And then once you do that and average that and you have like 2 customers that close, you go to tier 3. And with each one, we can give a little bit of a bonus. Like, hey, you don't get any variable comp here, but when you make to tier 3, you get variable compensation. Okay. So, or maybe you get more stock options. And so as you get to tier 4, now we're going to start looking at quality stuff. Like now it very much matters about the amount of revenue that you're generating and the conversion rate from appointments to revenue. So you kind of shift from a focus on quantity just to get their work ethic right. And you shift over time to a focus on quality, because they probably won't forget the work effort. But now that there are many months into the job, they know what working smart might look like, and they can focus on quality. So I can send some examples on that, but that's really my take today on the SDRs. You shift from a activity-based plan to a revenue quality-based plan as the SDR matures.
Hope this has answered the question. So the next one is rather a little bit general, I'd say. How a young sales leader should build their authority.
A sales leader build their authority. Yeah, I mean, you'd think it would be through being the best salesperson, but I think that's the wrong answer. That could really, it really hurts scale. It makes your salespeople lazy when you do their job for them. And honestly, the best salesperson is not usually the best leader. I mean, I always draw an analogy to sports. I mean, does the sports of, the coach of the Poland international team is not better than Lewandowski at football? You know what I mean? But like, why is he the coach and why is Lewandowski the center forward? It's like they're just better at their respective roles. And so as a leader, to build authority, I think being a great coach and developer of people and to be a great hirer of people, that's the most important thing. So if you want to succeed as a leader, which I think would build authority, you got to hire great people and you got to coach great people. And in terms of like building up your own authority, I think you need to like be disciplined around expectations and holding people accountable. And that means not being afraid to fire people. That's really the best way, is to set up a fair game, to set up fair expectations, and to hold people accountable to that. So what I don't like is when I come in and people are just firing people politically or subjectively. Instead, if you can say, listen, here's how a performance plan works. If you miss your goal for 2 quarters in a row, like if you're below 80%, 2 quarters in a row, you go on a performance plan. And if in the next quarter you don't make your goal, you're fired. But if you do, you're off the performance plan. And it's just cut and dry. And it's like, listen, it's not me being a bad person as the leader. It's just me. We have no tolerance here for mediocrity. This is a high performance company, and measuring success in sales is straightforward. And if you're not cutting it, then you have to go try to find someone else to work. And that builds authority. It's like, hey, listen, that person didn't get fired because Mark didn't like them. That person got fired because there's clear responsibilities and they didn't hit it. Right. So that's, another way to build authority. I guess the last thing I'll say is I love to publicly compliment people and privately criticize them. Right. So I love walking around the floor. And if I know that someone did a good job, a big customer, I love to see you, Margot, out in front of the whole team and say, Margot, I heard about that sales execution. That was excellent work and an excellent exhibition of our sales playbook. Nice job. I love to do that in front of everybody. But if we have a hard conversation, say, Adam, I'll go into a room and Adam, I heard about this, I heard about that. Can we talk it through? You know what I mean? So, and I think that allows you to kind of build positive authority with your team as well.
Right. Just going through the questions faster. Nico is asking, could there be different leading indicators that would cause churn in a monthly versus annual client? It's actually a very interesting question from my side, because I've been reading, I've been hearing a lot from SaaS leaders that they are trying to subscribe more customers on annual plans.
Yeah.
Is there any reason?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. Like I personally, it's one of the reasons why when you're starting out as a startup in SaaS, I don't like doing annual per se. I like monthly, so then you're challenging yourself to get that fast feedback. When you do annual, that doesn't fix the problem. It just delays it. And so when you move to annual, it's going to be great for your cash flow. It'll be great for your churn in the near term, but you have to be even more important, more detailed and disciplined around finding that leading indicator. I don't think the leading indicator is different depending on if it's a monthly or annual contract. It's like, it's how you define value. That doesn't matter in terms of how I might sign up, but it's just more important to do it an annual. And if you're a startup, I would suggest you not go annual right away. I think you should go monthly, just to get the fast feedback that you're creating value in the early months.
Yeah, I think that after 1 year, a customer can just churn, and because he hasn't used the product for the previous half a year, and you can't know about that. So it's
unless you're measuring it. But yeah, you could hide behind an annual contract. Over time, as you scale, you may want to move to annual contracts because it really helps the scalability of the financials and that kind of stuff. That's good because then you've got it down. But in the beginning, I like the monthly checkpoint.
Actually, it's asking about the quality of marketing content. If you can't afford good quality content, and the question is, should he proceed? Should she proceed with bad quality content, or just try to save up for better quality?
Yeah, don't do bad. It's getting, because it used to be okay to have average content because it was just a wide open game, but now it's gotten a more competitive game, so you have to have high quality content. But you can get creative on how you do that. There's a lot of gold in thinking about journalists, right? Like the second hire we made at HubSpot was a journalist for the New York Times. And so the good thing about that is like journalism, like traditional journalism has been struggling, newspapers, magazines. So you have a lot of talent out there that's, potentially looking to redefine their career. Some of them do work on a per article basis. So that's kind of interesting that you could like pay them in sort of a consulting model. And then, gosh, I mean, go to your local university. You folks have a lot of great universities out there. Go to a local university and find a journalism student. They're typically extraordinarily talented, and they don't have to know much about your domain. You can have them interview you or interview the people in your business that know your customer and their problems. They're just really good at writing, right? So quality content does not have to be expensive. You can get creative on how to do that.
All right. And also just referring to the Jan's question, also quite interesting from the side of marketing, as I've been experiencing also this influx of different marketing materials. So everyone is creating some kind of content, and it might be mediocre, might be better. What would be your recommendations about creating unique content, or content that would stand out from dozens of other articles, dozens of our other guidebooks or playbooks or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, well, one is just like interview thought leaders, right? Those thought leaders could be in your company and they could be outside of your company. I mean, look what we're doing here. You reached out to me, Margot. We've had a couple of discussions on this stuff. I mean, it's not hard for me to take an hour out of my day to jump on a video and do something. So it's like, you can reach out to people that are already respected by your potential customers and just interview them. That's interesting. And then you can write that up into a number of articles. All right. The other thing is, like, if you think about doing research, like doing surveys, we've got a company here that I look up to. There's a small sales consulting company with just 10 people, but every year they get 300 VPs of sales to fill out a long survey about how many reps they have, how they comp them, how many get fired, what their quota is, how many hit quota, all this beautiful data. And they put it into a nice report. And then they write a bunch of articles about the different charts and trends that are happening. I mean, Gartner and Forrester are not going to go and do a detailed report about your little niche, but you can. And that ends up being really high quality content for your customers.
I would also add up about the cluster pages that HubSpot has been recently also promoting. So I guess that it's also a very good SEO strategy, and also helps describe the topic in depth. So the user can visit the pillar page and have all the links to all the articles, related articles from one place. And also the Google search machine also can just position it much better. So it's
good point.
These search algorithms. All right, guys. So we are running out of time, and it's time to finish our webinar today. It doesn't mean that you cannot reach out to us and ask some further questions. So if you have further questions, just write us an email. I will be sending these materials, the after webinar materials, to you as well, so you can just watch the webinar again. And in case you've got some questions, just feel free to write to Mark or directly to me. I can pass over to Mark. Thank you, guys, and see you.
Thank you, everyone.